Hey there, Nick Jatakis here. In this video, we're going to do something a little bit different and go over this blog post that I wrote, which is a review of a 32-inch 4K monitor from BenQ, which is the RD320U. Now, this RD series is focused on programmers or software development. Basically, it is really tuned for viewing text clearly and has a whole bunch of different features around eye care and reducing strain. So yeah, typically, on this channel, we're doing some software stuff, right? Going over some shell scripts, Python, Docker, Kubernetes, Terraform, whatever it happens to be. But the tools that we use as developers are important, and that includes hardware. So if you're on the fence about wondering like, is going 4K worth it? Is 32-inch a good enough size to, read text clearly at 100% scaling? That's the type of stuff we're going to be focusing on in this video here. But yeah, let's get cracking here. So I tried out my first 4K monitor. I've been using it now for about 5 weeks. And there are some pros and cons here. And as mentioned here, using it for a bit over a month here for software development and of course video editing, because yeah, I do make a couple of videos as well. So back in 2017, I wrote this one post on like how to pick a good monitor for software development. I never made a video about that one. It's not important. By the way, all these links right now, it's hosted on localhost. I'll leave links to this in the description when it's published on the site by the time that you watch this video. We're not going to go over this post. It's really massive, but it goes over all sorts of different things like, how to calculate PPI and like, what is input lag and different resolutions and screen sizes and all sorts of different things here. And that actually turned out to be a pretty popular post on my site. Weirdly enough, it like ended up being one of the most popular posts on my site after 9 years of blogging about everything tech. Like who knew that picking monitors would be that important here? And this post here, the one that I wrote some time ago, no one asked me to write about that. I just bought a monitor and I'm like, what? There's a whole bunch of different criteria that I looked at there. And yeah, I just felt like writing the post then. Now, this situation is slightly different here, but hear me out, hear me out. So BenQ actually gifted me this monitor. And yeah, just to get this out of the way, this is literally the first post in video in over 9 years, 500 posts where, a company reached out to me to write a review about something, and I actually accepted there. So they sent me the monitor for free. In return for writing this post, they didn't even ask me to make the video, but when I write a post, I typically make videos nowadays. But I let them know, I'm going to be writing an honest review here, and they were totally okay with that. And also just for transparency and context here, over the 9 years, it's not like folks haven't reached out, right? I'm not certainly, a celebrity or a big time like YouTuber or whatever, but yeah, there's been opportunities where, I could have gotten easily over $5,000 worth of gear and services here, if I wrote a review about something, but I just didn't do it, right? I just don't want to do those things unless I really feel strongly about a product that I've been using and like really believe in it, stuff like that. This situation is a little bit different, right? A monitor is a very useful tool, and I've always wanted to try a 4K monitor. If you read that other monitor blog post here, I was sort of speculating to see like, well, could I actually read text comfortably at like 4K with 100% scaling with a 32 or 36-inch monitor, based on doing some pixels per inch calculations there. That's what PPI is there. It would be really silly for me not to accept BenQ's like really nice offer here. And if I didn't, I would have eventually bought a 4K monitor and did all that stuff on my own here. By the way, if you haven't heard of BenQ, they are a monitor-focused company nowadays, for 10 plus years. They've been around forever here. I've actually never bought one of their monitors personally, but I've only bought 3 monitors since like literally 2007. And that's the good old Dell FP 2007. This is, a 4x3, 16 by 1220-inch monitor. Great monitor for its time, in my opinion. Then I have like currently, or I should say previous to this monitor, I had this 25-inch like Dell, that's a 2560 by 1440 monitor. It's also served me quite well for a number of years. It's actually the monitor I suggested in this post here, which I did update over time based on different models being newer, because, that was back in 2017. And then also I have another 24-inch ViewSonic, whatever this is the model, it's another 2560 by 1440 monitor here. And yeah, prior to the BenQ monitor, I was using the Dell 25-inch as my primary, and then this 16-inch, or I don't know why I put 16-inch, there's actually 20, I'm going to fix that in the blog post here, as my secondary monitor. And this 24-inch ViewSonic was actually being used as a primary monitor for a company laptop, which I keep completely separate from my home setup here. Now, with that said, I never purposely avoided BenQ, I just so happened to pick these other vendors at the time based on doing whatever research that I did. Okay, cool. So that's out of the way here. Let's focus on this new monitor here, the 4K 32-inch, RD320U, blah, blah, blah. I'll leave links to these things in the description, so you don't need to like go to this post and then click links. One thing you can definitely trust though about this monitor is how well it was packed on the inside. So FedEx, they beat up this box pretty bad here, but there wasn't a scratch or hint of damage on the inside, even though it looks like the box had quite an adventure here traveling from California to New York. And I have to admit here too, the box kind of impressed me. Just seeing that bold white text here on the brown background of the box itself kind of gave me a feeling that BenQ's attention to detail is probably going to be quite good here. Even the box has readable text here, which lives up to the monitor's main feature of having readable text here for programmers, right? This is the best monitor for programming, apparently, and we'll see. But here are some quick specs here about the monitor that I've been using. I just took it out of the box, 5 weeks ago, whenever it was here. I just put it on my floor. Here's a couple different cables included. Yeah, this is the monitor here. Cables, you get a little manual there. So it is a 32-inch 4K monitor. It's 3840 by 2160 here, 137 ppi. It's actually a little bit more technically because, the monitor itself is really measured diagonally, and it's really 31.5 inches, not 32, but I calculated all my PPIs here off of 32, whatever, minor detail there. It is a 60 hertz IPS panel. Now they have this idea of it's a nano matte, anti-glare finish here, which really helps for not seeing reflections when you're looking at the monitor at a normal angle. Now it's kind of funny because, if you look at the screenshot here, you can see a pretty big glare here. This is just positioned in a really weird spot. It's literally on my floor and I have lights in a spot where it's hitting that in a way when this thing is on a desk, it just doesn't matter. It's basically complete blackness on the desk at a normal viewing angle, even when I'm standing or sitting, because I do have an adjustable standing desk. Now, with that said, contrast ratio is really high. I checked out the max brightness on this monitor versus my old Dell one, and yeah, it is quite nice here. It also has an optional backlight glow, which you can turn on and off. That could be useful if you are working in a dark room. There actually is a section later in the post that we're going to go over around that. It also has a whole bunch of different connection types, right? It has a couple different USB-C ones, HDMI 2.0, there's 2 of them, and then also there is DisplayPort here as well. Now, it's worth pointing out, powering a 4K monitor is kind of intensive in terms of bandwidth there. So to make sure you can at least have 60 hertz here, just make sure that your video card or wherever you're connecting this thing to supports either DisplayPort 1.2 or above, HDMI 2 or above, or USB-C. Now, in this case, DisplayPort stuff is backwards compatible. I actually have mine connected to DisplayPort here, and it's working completely fine. And yeah, I will mention that, at least for me, it did not come with a DisplayPort cable. So if you want to use that, make sure to get that ahead of time if you get this specific model. Okay, cool. So it also has a built-in KVM switch. There's a whole thing on their site, going over on how this all works here. But the idea here is, you can actually have 2 computers toggle between one monitor, keyboard, mouse, etc. If you wanted to go and check out their docs here, we're not going to go over this at all, but there's a video here showing how it works and a whole bunch of different things. That's pretty interesting to call out there, because a pretty decent KVM switch is going to run you like $50. So that's included with this here. And then also it has an adjustable stand. You can adjust the height, you can also adjust the tilt, you can also rotate it 90 degrees. And it is worth mentioning here that the model of this one is the RD320U. There is another model which ends with UA, and that one has a mountable arm instead of a stand like we see over here. Depending on your desk setup, you may have a preference for either one. It also weighs about, 24 pounds here, 11 kilograms here, and that includes the base stand included. And again, these specs are just taken from the manufacturer's site. I didn't put this on a scale and weight it myself. Now, as of late 2024, recording this video in November, it is listed for $650 USD, but again, this price may change over time. Now, couple of things to go, around quick specs or stats of this monitor here. What about input lag? That's something that we covered in detail in this post here. But yeah, as someone who has played first-person shooters at competitive levels, I tend to be pretty sensitive to any type of latency, whether it's coming from, keyboard, mouse, monitor, or the network, right? In this case, input lag is well, if I move my mouse, how long does it actually take for me to be able to see the cursor move on the monitor itself? And, it's not limited to input in terms of, using the mouse either. Now, back in the day, I will say, I used to put custom Teflon pads on the bottom of my mouse to reduce friction. Basically, I cared a lot about these things. And yeah, I don't have any hardware to officially measure input lag. I think that would require something like a high-speed camera and an oscilloscope. But yeah, also at the time of writing this post, the monitor is so new that I actually couldn't find this stat listed anywhere, and BenQ doesn't have it officially listed on their site. But to be fair, for most monitor vendors, input lag typically isn't a stat that you would see, especially not for a monitor that's focused on programming or office or desktop use, and maybe not gaming there. But I can say this, when I have this monitor side by side with the 25-inch Dell, I do not notice a difference between any input latency at all. And the Dell actually is measured at 13 milliseconds here, which is pretty respectable, especially from a monitor, of that age, which was like, whenever I got that monitor, I forget, 2017, 16, something like that. So it's been quite some time here. And I have used, though, other monitors outside my personal setup where it's like you can just move the mouse and you can just see, like, for sure there's some delay there, 40, 50 milliseconds, something crazy. And yeah, I can say safely that this monitor does not have that, which is good, right? It's good news. It means you can move windows and like moving around, typing, blah, 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 everything. You just don't feel like there's a delay as being due to the monitor, which is pretty cool. What about ghosting? Being able to see kind of like a trail of an image moving around. Yeah, I don't see any of that. You can move windows around quickly. I played some games as well, not at 4K because my GPU isn't quite good enough to do that. But yeah, I didn't see any ghosting at all. Now, I did mention dead pixels here. It's not really part of the monitor specs. I didn't know where else to put it in the post. It didn't deserve its own section here, but it is something kind of interesting. So I've actually never dealt with a dead pixel on any monitor. And technically this BenQ one, it didn't have it, but my stomach definitely temporarily sunk when I plugged it in and turned it on because there was this one white stuck pixel in a very like noticeable area of the screen. And yeah, as soon as I opened up something that wasn't white, I just noticed it immediately. And it was like, wherever, it wasn't like middle of the screen, but it was a little bit off to the right in the top right area. But yeah, I wanted to call this one out because as soon as I changed my Windows settings to set this new monitor as my primary display, that's like an actual Windows setting there, that stuck pixel disappeared immediately and it's been functioning fine. I don't think this is a BenQ specific problem or, this specific monitor, but if you happen to encounter the same thing on any monitor, like just don't freak out immediately, right? Try turning the monitor off or on and then toggling it as your primary display. That may fix it as well. Honestly, in this case, I don't know if turning the monitor off or on would have fixed the problem because, when you set it to your primary display, it kind of flickers, right? It kind of like resets whatever, Windows mode would need to do that. So it could have been the same effect as turning it on or off. I actually don't know. But yeah, in any case, there's no dead pixels. Everything is totally good. And I'm happy about that for sure. Now, in terms of specs, yeah, there are speakers. Technically the monitor has built-in speakers, but I didn't list that in the quick specs. I will say technically because I was looking forward to maybe using them because I don't have speakers or wireless headphones, and you know how it is, right? Sometimes you just want to be able to maybe listen to music without being bound to headphones, such as when cleaning. And of course, maybe you have wired headphones that you can put like your phone in your pocket and do that, but that's kind of a nuisance, right? Maybe you just don't want to wear any earbuds or headphones or whatever. Yeah, I don't want to trash BenQ too hard here, but let's just say having monitor speakers you'll never use is a little bit better than not having them at all because having actually a second sound output is pretty helpful. If you ever need to troubleshoot, right? Maybe if your headphones or, some other sound system isn't working, you can at least use the monitor as an output device to see if sound is actually coming through. But yeah, this is a very nice way of saying like, no, I will not be using those speakers. Yeah, interesting, let's say. But let's just say, fortunately, when it comes to the monitor doing monitor things, like displaying text, images, and videos with clarity and accuracy, yeah, it's pretty solid, actually. So let's get to some of those details. But for me, even before we get into the BenQ's details at all, I needed to be sold on like 4K itself. Like, is 4K actually like worth it? Is it, approachable at 100% scaling? And yeah, I'll save you some suspense here. Very doable. So this is by far, yeah, the most interesting thing I was looking forward to seeing. So going from 2560 by 1440 to 4K, basically, that's a lot of extra screen real estate, but you really only get that space, right? If you're running at 100% native scaling, right? Typically, this could be something like an operating system parameter, right? On Windows or macOS or Linux, you can run at things like 200 scaling, 150, 125, etc. But as soon as you go above 100% native scaling, you lose effective resolution, right? And here's a couple of popular percentages, right? So the most basic case here is like if you took 4K and you ran it at 200%, you are getting the same exact screen real estate as a 1080p monitor. Now, in this case, you're going to have more pixel density, so things will look a little bit more clear. I believe that was the whole idea around those Retina displays a long time ago with Macs, which of course still exists today. But, this idea of like taking a high quality display that has a lot of resolution and then just like scaling it, yeah, it is not a brand new thing here. And then of course, like 150 is about the same as 1440p. And this is a pretty common resolution nowadays. And then you can also do like 125, which sort of sits in between, what you would get at 4K versus 1440p. So you still win a little bit here if you wanted to do something like 125. And of course, you can always set a custom amount like 110% or whatever you need here. But yeah, if it helps, you can kind of visualize 4K at 100% scaling as having basically 4 1080p screens together in a 2x2 grid. And that's a lot of space in a good way here. Now, again, you got to remember this is all personal opinions here, but like I wouldn't bother getting a 4K monitor to run it at 150%. You know, at that point, you might as well just get a 2560 by 1440 monitor because you're going to end up with the same effective resolution here. And it's also going to be easier to power for your GPU and probably give you more bang for your buck in terms of price rise, especially if you want to get something like a higher refresh rate display. Now, to be fair, with a high enough PPI, pixels per inch, blah, 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 you know, typically as you increase scaling, then things will get a little bit smoother and clearer. But I don't think that's a trade-off worth making. You know, I've seen displays like this in real life, and like, it does look nice, but for me, yeah, it just doesn't seem like a trade-off worth making there. I really value screen real estate more than like that extra sharpness or smoothness, whatever you want to classify that as. But that's just me, right? Maybe you're different here. Now, 125% is a little interesting, right? You do gain about 500 extra horizontal pixels and 300 vertical here. You know, if we go back to the numbers over here, you know, if you take this 3K minus this, it's about 500, and that's about 300, right? The difference between 150 there. But, you know, if you go up to 100%, then it's like you gain so much more that like, I feel it's worth it just to run it at 100% scaling or nothing else here. Now, with that said, it's really going to be dependent on how well your eyes are in terms of vision, and then also like how far away are you sitting away or standing from the monitor. Because for me, you know, I'm standing right now currently as I make this video, but sitting is the same thing basically. But yeah, I'm 28 inches away or 70 centimeters. It's basically, you know, like an arm's distance away, a little bit more potentially here. And I can very comfortably read most text here and pretty comfortably read all text at 100% scaling. And by the way, my normal terminal font size is 10. We're going to see some screenshots, and you know, maybe I'll remove the curtain behind some things so you can see the full monitor's resolution, because right now you're only seeing like a quadrant of the monitor on the video now. But I do say pretty comfortably because it's not like perfectly effortless, if that's even a phrase, right? I don't notice any eye strain. I've been using this thing for like 5 weeks now, full time, doing a lot of work. It's totally fine. But I can definitely tell in some areas, like my brain perceives certain text as kind of small. Like this URL bar up here is sort of kind of small. But yeah, it's not too bad. Fortunately, the contrast ratio here is good, so it's not a problem. Usually when it comes to things like this, it's like, you know, if this were like a lighter color and it's small, that's when things become like actually a problem here. But if I were sitting further back or standing back, I don't know about 100%, because once I get to about 3 feet away, you know, 36 inches, I don't know what that is in cm, but you can kind of get an idea roughly of what it is. It's further away by like a little bit more, a decent amount more. Then yeah, my terminal font gets a little bit too small, and I don't know if I'd describe it as strain, but it's like, maybe, you know, it takes a little bit too much mental effort to be like just looking at it. And yeah, that I don't think I'd be usable, or I don't think I'd be able to use that for extended periods of time at that distance there. So I'm going to continue using that 100%, you know, given my current desk setup doesn't let me move the monitor further back. You know, I'm basically sitting at 28 and I feel pretty good about it here. You know, maybe something like a 34 or 36 inch monitor at 100% scaling would be perfect. But 32 is already like physically huge. Also, you know, as you go larger physically in the monitor size, then your pixels per inch is going to be less, which is going to make text look a little bit less sharp here. Now, it is worth mentioning here, you know, a 25 inch 1440p monitor here has 117 ppi. And yeah, this monitor here has 137. So having 36 inch monitor, let's see if you got a bigger one here at 4K, you know, that will give you an effective like 122 ppi here. Of course, it's going to be slightly larger because again, it's not going to be 36 on the dot. It's going to be a little less measured diagonally here. But yeah, basically it wouldn't be really any worse off than 25 inch monitor at 1440p here. But I will say having this extra pixels per inch right now, the extra 20 or so, it does make a pretty nice difference when it comes to text clarity. You know, I can say without a doubt at 100% scaling on this 4K monitor, text does look better than my old 25 inch 1440p monitor here with slightly less PPI here. You know, text now is more clear and it's more sharp. Now, is that due to the BenQ specifically, or is it due to just a higher PPI device? Hard to say there, but I will say it is noticeably better. That is good. However, I will say that 32 inches is massive compared to 25. So this is a setup, you know, I took this picture with my phone here. This is my desktop. You know, this is the BenQ monitor on the left here and my old Dell on the right here. You can see maybe, you know, in this little screenshot, it doesn't look that much different, but when you're sitting in front of it, it actually is. By the way, you know, it is worth pointing this out here. This is a little bit small to see for sure, but there is a little glowing purple dot right there, and I'll zoom in when editing this video so you can see that one. But that is actually a sensor that my camera picked up when I took this, and it's for detecting brightness, since the monitor can optionally, if you want, self-adjust its brightness based on the ambient light in the room here. And that's a feature that you can turn on and off. So, you don't have to have it, but if you want it, it's there. It's not a full-blown camera spying on you, but after this, I still did cover it with tape after I discovered it there. Now, I did reach out to BenQ about it, and yeah, they confirmed me it's just a sensor for like brightness detection. It's not literally like capable of taking, pictures as you may think like what a picture is. Now, again, did I disassemble it and like check out the controller and all that crazy stuff? No, I'm taking their word on that one, but you can feel free to do whatever you need to do there to make you feel comfortable using the monitor. But yeah, when I put this monitor on my desk, my first impression was like, what the heck did I get myself into? Because it's comically large compared to the 25-inch monitor. Now, you might think like, well, it's only a couple more inches here in each direction from a centered view, but like it actually makes a world of a difference. I don't know. Have you, let us know in the comments below, have you actually sat in front of like a 32-inch or a 36-inch monitor or something after having used maybe like a 25 or 24-inch monitor for a long time? It's actually pretty big here. And yeah. And let's see where we are here. Yeah, 28 inches away, I find myself having to move my head a little bit to see the four corners of the screen. On the other hand, with the 25-inch monitor, also at 28 inches away here, I had to move a bit less. Now, technically, my eyes can still scan the whole screen without moving my head, but it doesn't really feel natural to move my eyes that much. Basically, I'm not a lizard there, So yeah, so let's talk a little bit now about a second monitor upgrade, which is kind of a side topic, but it does relate to the new monitor itself, or especially if you're in the market of getting a slightly bigger monitor here. So with the old setup, I had this 25-inch 1440p monitor and the 20-inch Dell, and they were both side by side, and it was actually pretty nice. So the height of the viewing space for both monitors was nearly the same, which is pretty cool. If you use two monitors, it's kind of nice to have them be pretty similar in terms of that, so you're not looking like way up or way down to see the second monitor here. And they also both very easily fit on my desk, and it was really natural to look at either one when they were both facing straight forward, the monitors themselves. Now, I don't know about you, but when I do have a multi-monitor setup, I tend to have what I think is like a primary monitor, and I stand directly centered right in front of that. I'm doing that right now. And then I've got a second monitor to my right, so I can look over to it and do whatever I need to do here. Now, with the new setup here, yeah, that 32-inch monitor is really 28 inches horizontally, and the 25-inch monitor, again, which was my old Dell over here, is really 22 and a half. And so it's basically, a little bit over my desk's width. So my desk is around 4 feet. Again, you can convert that to meters if you need. It's a decent sized desk, but it's not big. And if you put them side by side, then they kind of hang off the edge just a little bit of the desk. That's not really too bad in practice, but having them both face fully forward, it does make looking at the second monitor a little bit difficult because that's so much horizontal space. We're talking like, 50 and a half inches here. And you kind of have to move your head a little bit here. So that's why in the above picture here, you see that I angle the second monitor towards me. You can see, well, maybe not, but it's a little bit like it's certainly angled towards me just to make, a little bit easier. It almost gives it like a curved monitor effect there, except it's a separate monitor, not actually literally a curved one here. But that's also where curving comes into play. It's a little bit nice if you have a very wide monitor just to have that stuff creep in at you at a different angle here. Definitely helps a bit when glancing, but with that said, I do find myself creating slightly new habits here where I kind of emphasize on using the left side of the second monitor because the second monitor is sitting to my right and the left side is closer to the main monitor, right? But yeah, I would definitely classify this as an upgrade from the second monitor perspective here. At least now I finally get to retire using this freaking DVI connector that I've been lugging around for like 2 decades. So I don't know if anyone even remembers what these are, probably depending on the age group of watching this video here. But yeah, it was this type of connector here, which was, pretty old school here. Modern monitors don't even have that. You'd have to get some type of adapter, but the refresh rate is going to probably be pretty bad. But yeah, no longer need that anymore, which is pretty nice. That old Dell 1600 by 1200 monitor had that. So I'm happy to retire that one. But now, yeah, let's go over some just desktop usage and like common apps. Like how does it feel using 4K at 100% scaling for like everyday tasks and coding and video editing and stuff like that? Does it really make a difference? I think so, but it also comes with its own like, I don't know, time sinks, like fiddling with window positions more than you might with something like a 1440p monitor or certainly 1080p. But yeah, overall, certainly it's a net win here because it feels like I have 3 monitors now instead of 2 for a whole bunch of different use cases because, now I view multiple things on that 4K monitor that I normally would have split across 2 monitors before. So it's almost like the 4K monitor is like 2 monitors in one. And then I also have that, air quotes, third monitor off to the right here. There's also a very interesting takeaway when it comes to being able to tile more windows at once, versus having a tab setup here. And we're going to go into detail what that means a little bit later here. But for now, yeah, let's go over some like Windows layouts for doing like specific tasks here. So yeah, these are everyday tasks like browsing the web and navigating around and using your operating system, right? This could be Windows, Mac OS, Linux, etc. here. But for browsing the web, I find myself gravitating towards using the middle of the monitor because having a maximized browser, with a 4K display at 100% scaling here, there's usually a lot of unused horizontal space here because you know how it is with a lot of sites, right? Usually you have some idea of like a max width defined on the site, and then maybe it's centered. So if you have a big full screen browser, you may have like a whole lot of pixels that are empty on the left, whole lot of pixels that are empty on the right, and then your page is like loaded there in the middle. So yeah, it's pretty nice though, because you can also tile multiple sites side by side, right? You can imagine having 3 sites comfortably open with the 4K monitor, being able to see all 3 at once, which is pretty cool, especially if you're doing some type of research stuff. But yeah, the extra vertical space though is always a win here. It makes it faster to view information here since you can just see more at a glance without needing to scroll down as much or wait for some network requests there. Now, for certain things like browsing like image galleries, that extra full screen space though is actually really, really nice. You can see so many different thumbnails at once here. I was looking at a whole bunch of different pictures I took on a couple of different recent trips here, and it was actually surprising at how many I can see in one screen without needing to scroll down. Now, with Windows 10 viewing like large icons with Windows Explorer side by side here, or Windows Explorer sidebar visible, at 4K, I can literally see 429 thumbnails as opposed with a 1080p monitor, 105, and then in the middle here at 1440, 189. And this really goes to show the difference though of how much larger, like how much more you can actually fit on a 4K monitor here. This is over double the amount here of a 1440p monitor, which is pretty impressive there in terms of that. So, if you're doing a lot of image editing, looking at thumbnails or looking at other pictures that you want to look at, then yeah, you can just see a whole bunch more here at a glance, which is pretty handy. Now, let's talk about coding here because, yeah, there's some pretty big wins. So at the terminal font size that I use normally, I can now fit 6 side-by-side code buffers at 80 characters. I've done a blog post about this one in the past here around why I still use 80 characters, even today. And this blog post was written, 6 years ago, whatever, but it still applies today too. And there's no overlap as well, which is pretty nice. You can also fit 128 vertical lines, which is quite handy when you are coding. So this is actually a native 4K screenshot that I have over here, but this font now in the video like this, when it's constrained to the small window that I'm recording from, there's no way you're going to be able to read this text. It's going to be a little bit crazy here. Let me actually just let me do this. I am going to remove that, and now you can actually see the entire 4K display on video. I will mention I'm using OBS right now to record my screen, but it's downsampling the video to 1080p. So yeah, things may look a little bit fuzzier than they normally do. And of course, depending on whatever monitor size that you have, things are going to look different here. But here is my normal coding window here. Again, now it is maximized, but if I just split this a couple of times, you can see I'm just splitting it a couple of times here. We are at 6 windows here. And this little, vertical line here is the 80 character marker. Now, and by the way, we're literally looking at the blog post in Hugo here, which is rendering the page that we're looking at here. But yeah, you can see this is like a ridiculous amount of space. And right now I can totally read this without any problem whatsoever, right? I never bought one of their monitors personally, blah, blah, blah. There is 0 eye strain at this distance with this terminal size at 4K, I should say. But yeah, let me get rid of that here. And then we'll go back to something that's, you can probably read on video. So let me just make this here, and then we'll go back to, what we saw before. So now you just see like kind of a zoomed in, like 1080p, just the window here. But yeah, whatever. On the blog post, if you want to take a look at this screenshot in all its glory, you can zoom in fully, copy this and go to the URL and look at a 4K screenshot there if you just want to see it here. Now, I will say for comparison, with my old monitor, 1440p, I was able to fit 4 coding windows side by side and 82 vertical lines. But now it's like I can do 6 side by side with 128 vertical lines. And, the vertical is really where it gets quite handy here. It really is. And, having the extra space is nice, right? You can mix and match depending on what you're doing. So maybe you just want to have like 3 code windows side by side with a terminal to the right of that, or whatever your preference happens to be there. And then you can have your second monitor to do whatever you need to do. Maybe you have like a web preview or you're viewing some documentation, stuff like that. Now, I did find with that 1440p setup, what I had before, then I usually had my terminal running in a second Tmux window. So, just going back to here, again, sorry, I know the font size is small, but like here is one Tmux window, but here's the other one. So I can like bounce between the two here. and you can see a different thing. So you can imagine, you're coding here, blah, 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 blah. And now it's like, oh, I need to switch over here, open up a console, run some command or whatever, come back here, change the code, go back to the console, run it. Oh, wait, what was the name of the thing? Oh, cool. And then going back here. So that bouncing around was a little bit tedious here. And you kind of had to keep things like mentally in your mind there. So, being able to see the terminal and your code at the same time is quite handy. Now, of course, I could have split things like horizontally instead with the 1440p monitor. And when I needed to do things like that, I did that, of course. Or maybe I split it vertically and I just didn't look as much at the code. Maybe I just had one code window open instead of 2 or 3. So it really wasn't, the end of the world here, but it definitely is more convenient with the 4K setup here. And yeah, when it comes to the vertical space, that's really a big quality of Win here when it comes to just viewing different code, right? So being able to see that many lines at once, kind of helps you get the big picture of a file at a glance. Now, technically you should have pretty small functions, right? You don't really want to have functions that are like hundreds of lines long or, 130 lines long. Sometimes you might need that. But in this case, you can't really read the text here, but it's like, this was the code here, and then there was like some tests on the bottom. So it's like you can have this stuff like stacked here, and this is where vertical space helps a bit because, even if you cut this in half, 128 divided by 2, it's still a good amount of vertical space to, still see something here and write some tests or whatever. So, even besides seeing like 6 windows side by side, I actually have 6 windows side by side. Then you have an extra bonus 2 over here. And if you want crazy, depending on whatever use case that you had, you can even have more splits here too. And before you know it, you're like looking at 12 different things at once, which is kind of a lot, but like there are some use cases maybe where that could be handy here. But yeah, basically the idea here is you have more options. You have more flexibility to split these things in a way that works for whatever use case that you need. Now let's go over a different use case here besides coding, which is like writing blog posts or, whatever you might be doing, right? Here's a layout of mine, just writing the blog post where I have a real-time preview of the blog post, usually up on the right. I kind of like keeping what I'm writing centered. That's why I have this small window here. That's the terminal just sitting there in the middle here. But then on the left-hand side here, I have room for whatever I might need. Now, typically when I'm writing, I want less distractions, right? But it's nice to have that extra space on the left when I'm researching things as I'm writing. That often involves, having a whole bunch of different browser tabs open or PDFs or whatever. And then I can just, look at that stuff here on the left and then, do my writing here in the middle and then look at my preview on the right, which is a really nice workflow. Prior to that, I would have kept that research browser on my second monitor or maybe used the browser tab, feature here in the preview browser, just opening up different tabs here. But again, that's more flipping between views. It's more context switching, like these micro context switching. It's nice just to be able to see everything kind of at once. And also this is kind of weird, but like when writing, I sort of like to daydream once in a while, even if it's only for a few seconds. So having my second monitor empty gives me an opportunity to gaze at my wallpaper and kind of get lost on my own thoughts here. It might seem minor and weird, but yeah, I like it and it makes me happy here. So now let's talk a little bit about image and video editing, because, if you're a web developer, working with that type of stuff is pretty common. Maybe not so much video stuff unless you're doing YouTube videos or streaming or whatever it is. But yeah, generally speaking, in both cases, being able to see more is good, right? Now I can actually open a 1080p image and see pretty much all of it at 200% zoomed in, which is a lot nicer than having to like pan around the image of, different things. I don't draw a whole lot, like literally with like a stylus or whatever, but I do have one and it's occasionally useful for certain blog posts or video thumbnails. The real win for me though is definitely video editing. So being able to view more of a video's timeline at a glance makes it a lot easier to jump around to different spots of a video. Overall, it can let you edit videos a bit quicker and makes you generally feel less claustrophobic here. I don't know about you, but like I remember the days when like 1080p was just coming around and like, man, a resolution that was smaller than that just felt crazy small when you finally got to see like 1080p. I sort of now have that same effect here at 4K where everything else feels like I'm so crammed. But yeah, in a practical sense here, it means at 4K, you might be able to view something like 60 seconds of a timeline at once, but maybe only 40 seconds at 1440p here. That might not seem like a lot, but it really is, if you're editing videos here, because oftentimes when you're editing a video, you need to make cuts. I'm sure you know maybe what a cut is, even without doing video editing, right? You might see someone have a very sharp, change in a frame where it's like, oh, they made like a hard cut or whatever. Not super important here, but typically, you want to make these cuts at a very precise moment to like maybe reduce that harshness of transitioning between two different frames here. But yeah, long story short, what that means is typically is like you're zoomed in pretty far in a timeline And so you can make these cuts at very precise moments. And the more that you zoomed in, the less total time that you can see. So being able to see as much as possible is quite helpful. Cool. Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about having a tiled versus tabbed workflow real quick here. So, tab-driven setups are great, right? For focusing on one tab at a time. In this case here, I have quite a few different tabs open in the browser that we can see here. I have 5 of them, but I can only view one of them at once. Of course, I can pull this out into a separate monitor window, and that's totally fine. But the idea here is, you have a whole bunch of them open. You look at them one at a time as needed, which is pretty cool. By the way, I didn't cover this here, but if you ever want to calculate your pixels per inch, you can put in the pixel resolution here for horizontal, vertical, and then how big the monitor is, and it will calculate what your PPI is. So that's how I arrived at those numbers that I got before, just as an aside here. But yeah, when it comes to the tab-driven setup here, this can even be further expanded to the idea of using virtual desktops. I don't know if I ever really made a dedicated video about that one, but like 8 years ago, I wrote a blog post about that. And virtual desktops are supported in most operating systems nowadays. It's an idea of having like a tab-driven setup here because it's like, you can bounce between as many of those virtual desktops as you need here and see a focus set of windows of your choosing, instead of like browser tabs or something like that. The idea here is you can see like one virtual desktop at a time, just like you can see one browser tab at a time here. Now, there is also this idea here of like a tile-driven setup, and this is really great for viewing many different things at once, right? This could be anything such as what we covered in the previous sections here around like image viewing, video editing, coding, etc. Being able to see 6 code windows side by side is pretty nice sometimes. But yeah, for certain problems, being able to see more at once is really helpful just to have all that stuff in your mind and visible without needing to just context switch around. And this 4K setup lets me tile things, or at least tile more things at once, which I consider is a legit win here when needed. So I don't know. I also have these weird like daydreams of like, I wish I can just have like a display mapped to every surface in my workroom and have some like input device that's like really intuitive to use just to make everything work. That'd be pretty cool. But for now, yeah, I guess 4K with a 1440p second monitor is going to have to do. Okay, so we've determined 4K at 100% scaling offers a whole bunch of different productivity wins. Now let's actually focus a little bit more on this monitor's specific features. So this monitor comes with quite a few different built-in features and optional software. In general, this RD series is built around providing a nice viewing experience for, programming, software development, or more generally looking at text. Now, the anti-glare, like, nano matte finish here helps a lot here. I don't really see any hint of my reflection in the monitor or in my ceiling lights when looking at the monitor at a normal viewing angle. So I have ceiling lights that are on the ceiling and they point down, like LED hi-hats. But then I also have some front-facing lights that are like reflected off the wall in front of me, just to light me up a little bit better for the videos. I don't do a whole lot to get like expert perfect like video lighting. I try to keep things practical with like no setup. But in any case here, yeah, even with these lights at different areas, like I just don't see any real reflections here, which is quite nice. Now, of course, and I'm not going to do it now, but like if I scoot down really, really low and then look like straight up at the monitor, then yeah, sure, I see some reflection there, but who's going to look at their monitor like that? Pretty much no one here. But yeah, additionally, there's a number of eye care features, such as being able to adjust colors with like dark and light editor things, which is pretty interesting. We're going to get to that in a couple of minutes here. But yeah, if you have sensitive eyes, maybe this monitor is something you might be exactly looking for here. So it also has this idea of optional, like they call it Display Pilot 2 software. So by the way, just a heads up, this software at the time of making this video, it does only work on Windows and Mac OS. I didn't see any Linux versions available. So if you happen to be using this monitor or the series of monitors and you are using Linux, then maybe reach out to BenQ and ask them for some Linux support here. But yeah, the takeaway here with this software is, and don't worry if you can't read it, it's not like that important to be able to see every individual thing. Unless you want, you can always pause the video and check it out here. And you can always look at that in the blog post as well. But yeah, this allows you to adjust a whole bunch of different settings, such as having your brightness get adjusted based on time, or like the ambient light in the room. There's all sorts of different options here, like this high DPI for Mac OS users, which apparently enhances text clarity as well as preventing scaling issues. I say apparently not to like, undermine what they're doing here. I just don't have a Mac system to test it out here, but it is a toggle that you can turn on and off in their software. So if you happen to have the series of monitor and you are using Mac OS, yeah, leave a comment to let us know if it actually makes a big difference. Another option here is this one they call Flow, which lets you set different custom color modes based on the time of day. If you have a really predictable workload and enjoy that sort of thing, maybe that's nice to have. I mean, in all honesty, I didn't spend a whole lot using these features here in the software. I am really picky with how I use my computer. It's in a controlled environment where lighting doesn't change unless I turn my lights on and off on purpose here. I don't want properties of the monitor to change based on time. I also hate mouse acceleration. That's kind of a weird aside to add, but I think it fits because the takeaway is like, I just want full consistency and control over my output devices or input devices in the case of mouse acceleration here. Yeah, I just want to have things happen when I choose to have them happen. So this idea of like, dynamically changing colors based on time and stuff, that is just not for me, but it might be for you. So just a heads up, if you like that stuff, it's there. And I just mentioned before too, like I wasn't able to see binaries that work for Linux here, so feel free to contact BenQ if that's important to you. So now let's talk a little bit about color modes and this one feature called dual view. So the screenshot that we're looking at right now is the on-screen display here. I can't really bring up my own on-screen display of the monitor here because, the OBS tool that I'm using to record videos is not going to pick that up. But you can see there's all sorts of different modes that you can choose here. And they have two that are very specific to coding. These are called coding mode here, and there's one for coding with a dark theme and coding for a light theme. And the idea here is this is going to make the contrast a lot better here versus, the background that you have. And it's pretty interesting though, because, typically you might have something like a very high contrast code editor theme that you might need to set in VS Code or Vim or whatever you happen to be using. But yeah, you can just set these modes in the monitor with the OC or the on-screen display here, and you get that out of the box here without needing to configure an editor. Now, that is going to be very hard to show on video. I really sort of can't because these are like monitor specific things that won't be picked up on video. But here are two screenshots from BenQ's documentation for this monitor, and it kind of shows you the before and after for choosing, coding with a dark theme or coding with a light theme. And it might be hard to tell on video here, but like for the after, text looks a little bit more refined, a little bit sharper, whereas on the left-hand side with the before, text kind of glows a little bit. Maybe it's a little bit harder to read. And personally, when I enabled both of these modes here for dark theme, because that's typically what I use here, I didn't notice that big of a difference as a screenshot shows here. It's hard to say exactly how much of a difference, 10%, 20%, 30%, something like that. But yeah, in any case, one thing that these screenshots don't show is like, to get this effect here also, like it is going to darken everything, like not just your code editor by default. So like your entire display is going to become darker, whereas the text will have a little bit more contrast here, and you may think like, well, if you're a web developer, like is BenQ on drugs there? Because a lot of programmers or web developers, color accuracy is very important, right? No one's really going to use something that messes with the contrast at the monitor level because seeing images accurately is important, right? Maybe you're developing a website where, it's on you to create some images or some color themes that, look good for the masses here. And so being able to see a accurate representation of color is really important. And I actually thought literally the same exact thing here. So I immediately went for sRGB mode, which is this mode here on the bottom here, which is going to give you a very accurate representation of what colors like should look normally like. Right, again, that's really important for web development here because you want to see what most folks will see on their devices. You want to know that red, a red apple looks like exactly this. And yeah. So BenQ actually thought of something very interesting here. So it has this feature called dual view, where you can assign different color modes to different sections of your screen or applications. So, that means you can choose to have that high contrast mode for your text editor, maybe on the right-hand side of your screen, whatever, but then also use sRGB mode for the browser or your image editor or your video editor on the left-hand side. And then, that's going to ensure that what you see is accurate there where it matters for those applications here. And then you can benefit from the high contrast text for your code editor. And you can also tweak it, using their software to have it apply in different ways. Pretty interesting here. But to be fair, I didn't use this feature a whole lot. I did experiment with it, splitting the screen there to do that. And it actually works even without the software there too for, basically like splitting your screen in half between two different modes here, which, if that sounds something that's interesting to you, then this monitor could be a very good fit for you as well. But to be brutally honest, I'm just running the monitor in sRGB mode for the full thing, and I'm not using these extra features. But to be a little more honest and maybe a little bit more forgiving, I also didn't switch to using a smartphone until 2021. And now that I have one, being able to use GPS and take nice photos on the go is wildly useful. I took a road trip recently, drove like 4 hours north. It's like without GPS, I would have been in a much worse spot trying to get there. But who knows? Maybe I'll warm up to these monitor features in the future. We will see. Now, I will mention there's this idea of a function bar. So on the bottom middle of the monitor, there's like these shortcut controls to access the OSD, the on-screen display here, and just scrolling up, I guess, 100 miles to where we were before at the top, just showing that one screenshot here. This is the function bar here. It's underneath the logo in the bottom middle. We also saw that screenshot over here where, it had that little sensor that got picked up by the camera of the phone. But yeah, let's go back to where we were before here. That would be somewhere. yeah, down here, the function bar. So yeah, it's there. That's where you access the on-screen display here. Their manual has a whole bunch of details there. We're not going to really focus too much here. And we're also almost done, by the way. I know this video is going to be pretty long. But yeah, one thing that's very worth mentioning here is, yes, the monitor supports being able to turn the power LED light on and off. So, most monitors that I've used that are recent, have this feature too. But yeah, the LED here for the BenQ one, it's pretty bright, but yeah, it's super easy to toggle off. You just go to, within the on-screen display under coding booster, function bar, and then the power key LED, you can turn that on and off. If you like it, it's there. But for me, if I'm sitting there and I want the monitor off, like I don't want a glow there for me personally. Now, speaking of glows, there's this idea of also having a backlight, and they have it labeled as moon halo here. This documentation here is from their site showing basically how it works. The back of the monitor is going to glow. It also has, automatic brightness adjustment. You can also change the brightness of it within the on-screen display as you like. But yeah, this is more what it looks like in practice. Again, I don't really have a super high quality camera to take like a picture of things in the dark and like give you an accurate representation. But I will say this picture on the right looks pretty close to what it actually looks like in real life. And it's pretty surprising. So I will say that this one is quite neat. I didn't think it was going to really make an impact, but I was wrong because I never had a monitor with this feature. So if you like working with your lights off in a dark room, this actually really makes a difference. It's really a little bit hard to explain, but it softens the difference between the darkness of your room and the brightness of the monitor. Now, could you say it's like reducing eye strain? Maybe. I will say this, there's an immediate effect of making it easier to see what's on your screen. It absolutely reduces the harsh difference between contrast between, the dark and light, and doubles also as like a little bit of like a night light for your desk, which is pretty cool if you just want to see something on the surface there. So yeah, BenQ, you definitely got me there. I do appreciate this feature, and I will use it if I am coding or, just working in the dark. It actually is a pretty nice feature. Now, I don't know if other monitors have that. Maybe they do, but in this case, I'm happy that this monitor has it. That is a feature I will actually be using a lot in the darkness, at least. In a bright room, it sort of doesn't really make a difference. Build quality wise, yeah, the monitor feels solid. The stand is great. You'll almost certainly be able to find a height and angle that works for you. And, if you were a giraffe, then you could rotate it 90 degrees and use it in portrait or vertical mode as well. With that said, I don't really plan to move it around too much. It's going to stay planted on my adjustable standing desk here, and I have full confidence that it won't slip. Yeah, it's pretty nice here. Now, the real question here is, would I buy the RD320U? And I think a more accurate question is like, would I buy it for $650 US? And I sort of feel like a jerk saying no, since BenQ was kind enough to send me the monitor. But like, I sort of can't justify dropping that amount of money for a 60 hertz monitor. But I feel like that's a very personal decision because, I find features like refresh rate more appealing than some eye care features as we approach this type of price range here. Because I don't know about you, if you've ever used a monitor that was like 120 hertz or 144 or 240 or, something higher than 60, even for office work, that makes a pretty big difference here. So I had an opportunity to go to Micro Center, which is a very big computer shop. It's basically like Home Depot, but for all computer parts and monitors and motherboards and CPUs and memory and, other tech gadgets and stuff here. It's a really great area or a really great place to visit if you like computer hardware and you happen to be close to one. But in any case there, they have a lot of different monitors to look at. And there are like 32-inch 240 hertz, like 4K OLED panels, but those are like $1,300, and it's not even comparable to compare that to a monitor that's like half the price here. But yeah, if you ever got a chance to screw around with like 120 hertz plus display, in my opinion, that makes a pretty decent difference here. Now, with that said, if you're okay with 60 hertz and some of the features we went over sound appealing to you, then sure, give the monitor a shot. And don't forget about that built-in KVM switch too. A decent one is going to be about $50 here, and that's a price that you don't need to worry about here because it's going to be built into the monitor. So I haven't seen other monitor manufacturers aim a product specifically at text clarity, programming and eye care. So I do commend BenQ for taking a shot at this market. I don't think what they're doing is a mistake here, and while I am writing code most days here, I'm not sure if I'm a complete target audience match there, but I do know that audience certainly will exist, right? If anybody has some, eye strain or issues, that's a pretty big population of folks, then yeah, this could be a really good fit there. But on that note, I do want to give a shout out to BenQ. Thanks a lot, sincerely, for giving me an opportunity to try out your monitor. I'm going to be happily using it as my primary monitor for years to come here. And one thing is for certain, I now highly value 4K, and even after using it for a bit over a month, that is something now that I wouldn't want to lose here. So yeah, let us know in the comments below if you're going to be trying out this monitor, or maybe if you are using like a 32-inch 4K monitor, let us know how it is here. And with that said, yeah, if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them in the comments below here. With that said, if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. Really does help a lot. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.